So you should know that I hardly ever play guitar anymore. Way back, 45 years ago, I played guitar for weddings and stuff. Now I pick it up once a year. Hope it holds a tune. My playing is really regressed and my fingers hurt after just a few chords. And it seemed like, though, it would give us a good metaphor, a way in to understand an important part of this week's gospel. So we'll see. Here's the homily. There is much that goes into a piece of music. There's melody, harmony, tempo, instrumentation, dissonance, dynamics, tempo, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that often does not get mentioned, but it's important, is this. It's the rest. That pause, of whatever the length, does so much for the beauty and integrity of the composition, right? It is that sound of silence, and it's important. What about the rest in our lives? The rest in our lives. I got 3 things about that. 1, we need rest. We need time for rest, intentional time for rest. My gosh, our God chose to rest. In the very beginning of the Bible, in Genesis, we hear of after God created the world on the 7th day, God took a day of Sabbath rest. God rested and just savored the beauty of creation. And then, perhaps not confident that we would follow God's example, God gave us the 4th commandment, which I bet you know, which is, we should keep holy the Lord's day, the Sabbath day. And it is so much more than I went to church. It needs to be a day of rest. Rest for our souls, of which Mass matters. Don't hear me wrong on that. Jesus himself would take that rest. The scriptures would often enough mention how Jesus slipped away from the crowds to a deserted place. He needed time to remember who he was, to remember that he was with his God, to reconnect himself, to remember again what truly mattered to him. And isn't there some part of you, there is of me, that somewhere at least knows that what God said and what God did and what God invites me to have a Sabbath rest, matters, is important. We go in a way that is so fast and furious, so to speak, that we feel the effects of that pace in our lives, the stress, the chaos of being overscheduled, and the consequences to show up in our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual well-being, our relationships, our daily joy, or lack thereof. Here's a quote about all of this. Beware the barrenness of a busy life. I repeat that, beware the barrenness of a busy life. Now, that's not a recent quote. That came from Socrates, who lived several hundred years before Christ. It's long been a temptation to have our minds going all the time, always to never be able to just truly rest. And whatever helps us truly rest. We need the rest rest for our souls that Jesus invites us to today. Okay, that's number one. We need it. Number two, this rest is both misunderstood and it's difficult to do. On the category of being difficult to do, take it from a workaholic. I have this tendency to unconsciously think if I just work and work and work and work, I'll get to a point where I can now finally step back and enjoy and savor and relax. I'm never going to get there. I'm the person who always sees how much more there is to do. I'm invited to learn to take Sabbath rest in the middle of it, right? And maybe you're like me in that, maybe not. But I do know that we all need to learn to take that kind of Sabbath rest. Otherwise, we miss the life we have while we have it. We miss it. And we're a little bit confused about what this rest is. For example, this is not my temptation, but some people think it's just binge watching their favorite TV show or scrolling through their phone for social media. For most people, that doesn't really give rest to the soul. Just kind of messes up our sleep. Or maybe we think that once a year vacation, that does it. Nah. This needs to be built into our daily lives. So that brings me to three, just a few thoughts about being intentional about building this in. Author and speaker Suzanne Stabile, whom I've heard present and some stuff I've read, travels a ton for work and has a very full life. But she does not work on the Sabbath. She said she and her husband go to church, any family and kids in town, they go together, they have a meal together, they make sure to get some time in nature, and those kinds of things that nurture and nourish her spirit. But she does not answer emails, write, return phone calls. And then she says, but I get it done. And other things not to do, it means, well, stuff like not scheduling every single night with a different sport or activity, perhaps. Not spending all that time in front of screens, as I mentioned, or numbing ourselves with any of the ways we numb ourselves. That makes our spirits less alive. So if we're taking away some of that, what do we add? Most people, I think, if they can do so, find a blessing in being outdoors in creation, just as God, on the day of rest, savored the blessing of creation. I know I personally love to ride my bike at sunset, or somehow be at my nature space at sunset if I can. I'm not telling you where it is because I'm hiding from you. And I'm also someone who finds a blessing, and you might do this yourself, to keep an occasional journal, just to write a few thoughts, or a gratitude journal, things you're grateful for, or things that you really want to remember, or to process whatever the struggles, where it goes. I don't encourage people to think I got to do that every day. And this is not a paid advertisement, but I find blessing in that app, Day One, which is a journal app. That makes it so much easier for me because I can just talk something into my phone or typing it into my iPad and then go back and tweak it up a little bit later if I want to. But that's just how that works for me. For some, it's music. Music that soothes the soul. Or a moment of wild, loud music. Maybe you close the door in your room and dance with abandon. Or maybe it's creating some art. Or maybe quiet time, good conversation with a friend. All of these things open us up in ways that we won't even understand. That you might not even feel it in the moment, but the habit of this makes us more alert to life while we have it, and therefore ultimately to God. Right? And if it's really tough for you to make time for that because what, you're a single mom working 2 jobs, or you and your family are now caring for someone in crises, a parent in medical stress, or whatever it might be, we can at least take some moments of Sabbath rest along the way. And it's important, especially, to do so then. Maybe turn off everything in the car and just become aware of being you. Maybe as you walk to that building, whatever, a look back at what's been a blessing so far this day. Or when that alarm goes off first thing in the day, is just remember anything that it's important you to remember, that your love, that your life matters, that before your feet hit the ground and plunge into the chaos of a given day. Whatever our life situations, we need to each do some things that are obviously not productive on purpose to see what changes in us. Something will. Because as God tells us, this Sabbath rest is so important. Today Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest." You will find rest for your souls. It's a scripture passage that gets chosen often enough for funerals because we like the thought of our loved one resting in peace. We even say, that's a phrase we actually use for them. And it's interestingly for us often enough that at funerals is when we are most likely to remember again what we say really matters to us. That we want to slow down and not miss our family members along the way. That we resolve to spend time on those things that are truly important to us. And when God created music and our love of music for us, God created as a piece of that the importance of the rest. And when God created each human heart, God also put in our hearts the importance of the rest. And may we take Jesus at his word and find rest for our souls.